Hello and welcome to the Global Migrant Festival 2020. We are thrilled to be here to share with you about the Archipelago. The Archipelago is a writers' collective in the refugee communities of Indonesia that began with a simple question about a year ago. We asked far and wide, who dreams of being a writer? And the response was enormous. We began mentoring new writers to start a creative career and publish their work. And just a few months ago this year, we launched thearchipelago.org, an online magazine home to new literature and art that explores migration. Through our writing community and online magazine, we're working to build a new space, inside of which our writers are engaged with as creative actors, not as witnesses to hardship. A community where writers can forge new narratives, shape the conversations that concern them, and speak up based on the strength of their creativity and intellect. The goal for our time together today is to talk with you about the need for more writing that is written directly by writers who are refugees themselves. We've seen so much journalism, film, and storytelling on refugee experiences that is produced by Western mediators, but too often, the creative work that displaced persons have always been doing remains unpublished or unheard by wider audiences. So the mission of the Archipelago, and the reason for our panel today, is to both celebrate and grow the creative work being done by displaced writers and artists. I'm Kieran Kresovich Salazar, a fiction writer, a full-time public service fellow at Harvard University, and the founding editor of the Archipelago. It's great to be here with you, and I'm joined today by four brilliant writers of the Archipelago. Warsan Weedhsan is an African writer and co-director of the Archipelago Writers Collective. Her writing aims to uncover the social and cultural problems facing refugees and to support women to stand against discrimination. We're also joined by Joniad, who is a Rohingya journalist and a journalism editor of the Archipelago. Joniad contributes to film and publishing accounts of refugees searching for a safe and durable solution. Erfan Dana is a Hazara writer from Afghanistan. He's an activist, a volunteer, and an interpreter for refugees in Indonesia. And MA Raha is a fiction writer who writes on the lives of girls. Her goal is to be a changer of her culture and to empower girls and women, especially in Afghanistan and Iran. So welcome to our panel, and I'd like to start by asking Warsan, can you share with us what is the significance of literature written by writers who are refugees themselves?
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. And I'm really appreciative to participate in this great global festival. And I say thanks for everyone in audience and organizers. I'm a Warsan and I'm a writer. If I'm going through your answer, why is important? Refugee writing is most important thing that publishing in this world. The refugee writers to write. The words come from the owners and the experience they have had. And we can say refugee writing is they are saying the words have a full information. They are putting together the reality and confidentiality what they are saying in their stories. For example, if I take the foreign writers or journalism, always when they write the stories and words for refugee, they are representative. They are applying a rules, politic, representative, and media marketing. But when refugee writers is important because they are writing their feeling, their true story, their real situation, that there's no needed any witness or any investigation. As a refugee writer or as a refugee person, whenever I talk to foreign writer or journalism, it seems like a stranger. And whenever they publish my words, I feel like information or they cut out my sentences or my messages that I would like the global readers and global audiences hear it. But the refugee writers, they put all the information together with fightful and confidentiality. And there's no representative. They represent it by themselves and they are telling the full information with the reference. So that's why I say refugee writers is most important thing that you can find out the real situation of refugee in Indonesia or the Asian country there to retain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warsan. And I'd like to turn to Erfan Dana now and ask you the same question. For you, Erfan, what's the significance of literature written by writers who are themselves refugees? And how's this different to the other kind of writing on refugee experiences?
Um, before I start off, I would like to thank the organizers of the Global Migrant Festivals and the Archipelago for inviting us in today's session to read and show some of our writing pieces work, and for the viewers, participants, and panelists, and also share some of our lived experiments as refugees trapped across Indonesia. Um, to your point, what is the importance of literature written by writers who are refugees? When a refugee writes about his or her plight, um, it is much more effective than someone else write about his or her plights. It has broader and more direct effects when the when the when the people and the reader read the um, first hand experiment from the refugees themselves. Instead, someone else write their story or about their plight and about their problems. Um, when I write about my feelings, I know how I feel, but someone else cannot write about my feeling. They don't know me much well, but when I decide to write about my feeling about the hardships I experience as a refugee in Indonesia, I'm able to capture every little hardships or problems that I have experienced throughout this perilous journey when I first escaped genocide back in my home country. Since then, I have gone through a lot of traumatic experiments and hardships, and I experienced a lot of suffering. So I am the sufferers, and I am the owner of my own feeling. So I'm much more able to write in a better detailed, in a detailed way, other than someone else write on my uh, behalf, because it is more likely and it is more reliable when the people read when I write something, and instead someone else write something on my behalf. Yes.
That's an incredibly important point that you make, Irfan. And I'd like to take this question to Jay and Joniad and ask you, Joniad, more specifically, in terms of journalism in your work, where you've published a number of articles in a lot of international press, from Al Jazeera to BuzzFeed to Australian papers like SBS, what do you see are the differences between the journalism that you're writing and that you're helping train other writers who are refugees to create, and the journalism that's come before?
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am Junaid, and I'm a journalist based in Jakarta. I agree with most of what my friends have said already, like Erfan Dana and also the Warsong. Well, I remember, how difficult it was for us to get media attention when we conducted protests in Makassar, specifically. We contacted several, local medias and international media, but no one pays any attention and no one covered our story. And most of our protests all went in vain. We didn't get any outcomes from our protests. We like spent hours and hours standing in the excursion heat, yeah, to get our attention out there, to get some international attention, but nobody has paid any attention, and all of our hard work and protests all went in vain. And ever since I have started writing, and I have been effectively able to address whatever happenings, among the refugee community and raise the awareness, publishing in international leading medias such as Al Jazeera, SBS, and BuzzFeed, and many others. So one of the good example I can say is that when I wrote about refugees living independently in Jakarta during the COVID-19, lockdowns. So when the lockdown was imposed in Jakarta, most of the refugees were actually surviving with the voluntary activities, and they were also and when the lockdown imposed, their activities were stopped and they couldn't go out, which means they are facing huge difficulties to even survive, and there were no any sort of considerate decisions made for the refugee to support refugees in time of COVID-19. Then after I published a story about this and addressing the issues and getting refugee court on what is happening to them, how they are surviving, and later uh, I I see that now refugees are receiving some of the COVID-19 assistance. So these are one of the example of how powerful if refugees write themselves. And there are many small changes happening across Indonesia. Uh, you know, that's because before not many refugees were able to write, and this is one of the things that I becomes why a refugee journalist. So I think the most important thing then is that being able to write your own story give us ample of of freedoms and opportunity to express our hard content. And until I started writing my stories, I always feel like I have not been hard enough, and that there is always a lot to talk about, than just giving a quote to the conventional journalists, uh, to the stories written by other journalists for the media. So this is the biggest difference I have seen, and what my friend have described already, that we are not being hard enough if others write our stories. So there are many writings that I have still not been able to publish because not many media actually like to publish refugee things. So that's where I can end, uh, this questions.
And Junaid, I'm curious to ask as well. You mentioned how there were these ongoing protests in Makassar and nobody wanted to cover it, but eventually you did break through, and you did indeed. One of the first articles we were working on was about these protests that came out then in Overland, a magazine in Melbourne, Australia. But um, this is a challenge that many displaced writers face, where it's very hard to break through, especially at first. And many writers in our collective face that, as well as writers like Baruz Buchani, where he spent years writing before he actually first published. So how did you break through?
Yeah, well, I have been trying to publish the protests, and but no, it was very difficult for me to get media contact and media attention. Then, with the support of my Australian friends as well as you, who also helped me on that, so I finally able to publish the first articles of the refugee protest in the Overland. And yeah, it's all happened because of the support from my friends, and especially you. So I'm very grateful to these people that supported me, in publishing all these stories.
But it took a huge amount of persistence, and I think that's what is really notable that for so many of the writers in our collective, they're writing for a very, very long time before they do get published, and just how intense that work is. But then you've been able to now see the results. I'd like to go to MA Raha. And so MA Raha's work explores the Farsi term CSR, which she's rewriting through fiction, and she's currently working on this through a novel in progress. MA Raha, to start with, could you please read us a passage from your novel?
Okay, hello everyone. Before I start reading, I just wanted to say thanks to the Global Immigrant Festival and also Karen to gather all these people here. And yeah, I want to start reading. Okay. Hey Fatima, why don't you go to Marcel's house? It is the time for you to win the earring that you lost to her last time. That is the right thing to do. You are a smart girl, Fatima said to herself while jumping up. Mursal's house was 1 block further than her house. It is the only thing that she always does with pleasure when she was bored. She grabs her jump ropes and jumps all the way. When she arrived at Mursal's house, in front of their house was crowded, and her father's voice was echoed in the alley. Women were watching and whispering in each other's ear. It is their everyday job. When she gets bored, they come and present a show for the neighbors. The girl with the engraved gold necklace with the name of Allah and white silk scarf said to the woman next to her. Mursal's father, Khaled, a big-chested person, was pointed to Mursal's mother, Halima. You and your child are harami. They are not my children. God knows that you brought them from birth. If you respected me, you would not bring this cold tea for your tired husband who worked all the day to fill your big bellies. Halima was sitting on the floor, breastfeeding the newborn of her rival wife, Gulzama. She looked pale. Her hands were shaking, but she was trying to calm the baby while she was caressing Khaled quietly. God disappear you from the world, man, inshallah. When Fatima entered the yard, Khalid raised his voice. I'm surrounded by siyasa. I'm tired you all. I had if I had a bacha instead, he would work and bring money for me. But you all are useless. Oh Allah. My first child was a girl, the second was a girl, the third was a girl. You gave me 7 girls. You are trying to destroy my generation. Khalid replied. Yeah, that was some of the parts from chapter 1 of my novel.
Thank you so much, MA Raha. And can you tell us more? Why are you writing about this term CSR?
Okay. Actually, I started writing when I was 11 years old, and I was writing about everything that I like, and when I saw something that was not right, I just write about it. I just write a story. But now I'm writing a novel about an Afghan girl who wants to change her people's perspective toward girls. And I try to show the girls' feeling when they are called by the word siyasa. Siyasa is a word that my people use when they are talking about women, girls, and the word siyasa means simply is the combination of two words, sia and also sa. That sia means black and sa simply means head. But the actual meaning is totally different, and it means the miserable woman, a person who cannot do any single positive thing. My purpose is why should we use this negative word that has a bad or negative impact on our beloved one? And I remember the first time when I heard that word, actually I think I was 6 or 5. I went to the near to the mirror and I said, I look at my hair. I said, my hair is not black, so I'm not a siyasa. That's okay. And I can say that was the actual one, or maybe I can say the actual force came from one of my family friends. Me and 2 other guys was traveling to from Jakarta to Bogor. I think it was almost 2 years ago. And one of my family friends came to us and said, it's not okay that siyasars travel between cities. It means girls should not travel between cities alone. When I heard that word, siyasa, I felt like I cannot do anything and I'm the weaker one. It was like uh, He was underestimated me. And I say, okay, that's the time I can say I should write about this work. And I try to show the gay spirit in the story. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much for sharing that, MA Raha. On this note, I want to go to Warsan. And Warsan, you write on women's experiences, and I'm hoping, can you share with us a passage from one of your articles on women's education? Warsan, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. I write more about refugee women. So always I would like to represent is my voice and other refugee to have their rights of education and the other like human rights. So my article is too long. I would like to pick up piece of writing. I can say there are many young refugee ladies. They are trying to building their basic education like English, Bahasa Indonesia, computer skill, mathematics. Unfortunately, they don't have any opportunity of higher education or special courses they can build in to support the rest of refugee women if they have the chance. After many years, in this situation, the refugee of Indonesia, 6% they are illiterate. They don't have any education. So a group of them is no longer trying to support the rest of refugee. They have a following discussion to establish a center of refugee that called Sisterhood community, that they're trying to support each other, the refugee of Indonesia, especially Jakarta. This center almost took 1 year preparation for launching 200 women to give them support. Unfortunately, it's not enough. A refugee in Indonesia, they don't have a right to learn anything or the right to develop any official education. So we can say the refugee women, they are most vulnerable group in Indonesia. We are refugee women living in Indonesia. We are mothers of today and mothers for tomorrow. We are not under any flag. We need to take care of our life in our hands. To get our rights of education of a woman, all of ages. The answer is this issue of women's education is if everyone's responsibility. I can take that passage. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing from your article, Warsan. And this points us to the very urgent reality that is the situation for refugees in Indonesia, especially this year during COVID-19 and the global closure of borders. I want to ask a broader question to the group, which is, can you give our audience some context? What are refugees in Indonesia facing? And maybe we can start with Jay and Joniad. Joniad, would you read to us as well from one of your articles and then share a bit more about the context? Joniad, you're on mute. Thank you.
All right, thank you for giving me another opportunity. Uh, so I will read one of the stories that I published on the SBS. That is about a person who was suffering mentally, and he was not receiving any sort of mental support. So the article is titled "Refugees Stuck in Indonesia Are Experiencing a Mental Health Crisis." Thousands of refugees, travel to Indonesia hoping to make it to Australia. The vast majority of them never will. In the mid-January, I visited Miss Muhammad Sira's, a Rohingya refugee, at the mental health clinic called Clinic Abasila in Makassar, Indonesia, for the second time. The first time I visited, I couldn't find it, even though I was standing right in front of the building. It looked more like an abandoned drugstore than a medical establishment. Aside read outside, only permission card holders are allowed to enter. When I asked a nearby shopkeeper about the clinic, she said there are a lot of complaints made against this clinic, and the doctor rarely visit the patient. Most of the time, the unprofessional nurse treat the patient. And two of my acquaintances were treated at this hospital for 2 years, but no change in their health. Twice I visited there. I have never, I have never seen a doctor, on promised. So, so we spoke through a small window in the door in his room. Sira said, "I have been suffering mentally without proper medical care for 3 years, and this is my fourth time at this clinic, and they keep me locked up all day."
And Joniad, could you share more about then what is the situation when it comes to mental health for refugees in Indonesia? Can people access care? Um, what is happening in the refugee communities when it comes to mental health?
Well, Muhammad Siras is just one of the example of many refugees suffering from mental disorder. I discussed with one of the psychologists in Indonesia, and he said that, as far as I understand, nearly all of them are actually suffering uh, from uh, from some sort of mental disorder, and some are in worst case, some are in middle case, some are in like in average case. But the reason why refugees are mentally suffering in Indonesia is because first, the first thing is that they have no activities. They are suffering from the lack of activities. Uh, that's because there are no right for refugees to work, to study, and to go to university, to go to a school. They can't even travel from city to city. So refugees living in IOM accommodation, they are like impose a lot of restriction. They can't even visit their friend, at night, and there is always security, keeping a good eye on them. They cannot travel within 20 minutes, 20 kilometer far from their designated city, and they cannot, ride any sort of vehicles, and they can't watch. So refugees somehow, I can describe like refugee in Indonesia are living in a absolute open prison. They are just living, but they are not, they don't have any basic human right. So I can give you an example of refugees. I can give you an example of refugees living in Indonesia. Like imagine, a fish living in a glass of water. That fish has only, let's say, a few water to survive, but it cannot move around to find its resourceful area where it can nourish and develop. So this is the same situation as refugees in Indonesia. They are somehow given some sort of assistance just to survive, but their human rights as human beings, have been denied completely. They are like living, what can I say, like animal living in the cage, in the cattle. So animals are given food just to survive. So this is the refugee situation, and that's why many refugees are actually suffering mentally. And there are some refugees that has already given up on their life and take their own lives. So since then, since 2014, I have been recording around 7 refugees, yeah, including the recent suicide last month and this month. So they are taking their own life because they do not see any pathway, to imagine a future, in freedom. So they are trapped absolutely in a complete isolations, in a complete open prison. So that's what I can describe about the refugee situation in Indonesia.
Mm. And you and Erfan, along with Warsan and others, wrote a very powerful memorial to one of these individuals who sadly took their life, Asif Rizai. And it was a really powerful tribute to him 2 months ago. I want to invite you, Erfan, to add to this conversation. Erfan, can you speak to the refugee context when it comes to people living under IOM accommodation outside of Jakarta?
Yes, why not? So I live in IM shelter outside of Jakarta, and I'm quite familiar familiar with the limitations and with the unnecessary regulation the immigration authority impose on refugees to limit their freedom and cause severe psychological and mental distress to the refugees. Uh, uh, in particular, particularly during the COVID-19 time, many people, ordinary people, are just finding life, discovering about life in confinement and isolation. We refugees have been living it for many years. Even before the global outbreak of COVID-19, our situation was not very good. But after the COVID-19, it made our living situation even more worse. Uh, Under the lockdown, life is very difficult. We are not able to get out of our, we are not able to escape the monotony of the repetitive monotony of our small, tiny refugee rooms. And uh, this causes a lot of mental and psychological disorder and distress to refugees trapped in refugee accommodation. Yes, we wrote a tribute. We collectively wrote a tribute to Asif, who passed away in Makassar. Uh, and his story was said as well. He was one of the seventh refugees who ended their lives just because of waiting for too long for freedom to come, and their human rights were disrespected, and they were not given the opportunity to live basic. Sorry, they were not given the chance to live an ordinary life. That's why they become hopeless, and the only option they thought was possible for them was to end their lives, because uh, the resettlement program for refugees in Indonesia is very small. There are very few places available for refugees, resettlement for refugees in Indonesia, and it makes the situation even worse for refugees, especially who are living in overcrowded IOM shelter. Over 8,200 refugees, including families with small children, are living in overcrowded, unsanitary situation in IM shelters in Indonesia. They are all at grave risk of catching the virus. Um, where I live, thankfully, we do not have anyone tested positive for COVID-19, but uh, on March of this year, when a refugee was tested positive to COVID-19 in Makassar IM shelter, I instantly took action. I wrote an article and I published it on the Jakarta Globe and republished it on the Archipelago, and we received a very immediate attention. And one of a lady, a kind lady who volunteers as a teacher in a Russian Learning Center in Jakarta, sent us sanitary supplies so we could protect ourselves from catching the virus in IOM shelter. So if the accountable organization who are dealing with, who are responsible and who are dealing with migration issues, do not take care of the refugees, I think, do not provide them counseling, psychological counseling, if they do not provide them timely medical treatment, the self suicide is self-suicide is on the rise, and I hope that people, the accountable organization, put this issue into immediate consideration, and they start looking after refugees who are suffering from mental disorders in IOM refugee shelters across Indonesia.
Thank you, Erfan. And within this context where refugees in Indonesia have no right to work, to access healthcare, to study formally, to marry or to move. I'm interested in, for all of you, why have you chosen writing as your response to that? What is the importance of writing to you? Why have you chosen it as your way to stand back and resist? Maybe you can start, Erfan, jumping off.
Yes, absolutely. When people ask me about why I am most patient about writing, I always respond writing is an important part of my life. I always speak up against any political structure and system that imposes, as I mentioned before, unjust, inhuman, and unnecessary limitation and harsh regulations on refugees to limit their freedom and choices of experimenting a normal life. When they suffocate our voice into silence, when they want to want us not to be heard, when they suffocate our voice, I don't give up. I still resist. There are many forms of resist. There is physical form of resist. There is you know uh, writing is also a resistance. So I think I don't put my down because I know it is a resistance. I resist against the unjust through writing. So when I see experience and injustice happening to my fellow refugee brothers, when their human basic rights are disrespected, when they're not given the chance to live freely, if I don't speak up, if I don't write about the situation, I feel lost, devastated, and guilty of not being able to make their voice heard far and wide. Why writing is very important in a situation where we live. Uh, I share one of the uh, uh, example as I briefly, pointed out before. On March this year, when a refugee in Makassar tested positive to COVID-19 and infected as many as 50 other refugees, I quickly took action. I wrote an article warning the accountable organization about the high possible outbreak of COVID-19 in other overcrowded IM shelters across Indonesia, where they don't have access to sanitary supplies to better protect them from catching this virus. After it was published in Jakarta Globe website and republished on the Archipelago, it received good attention. A lady who works in Russian Learning Center in Jakarta sent more than 300 pieces of face masks, soap, hand sanitizer, disinfectant, and soap dispenser for refugees in our shelter, so we could prepare ourselves and fight against the virus. So when we write, we are being heard, and when we write, we share our plight with those who are concerned, with those who are with those who are concerned about making a change in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Erfan. I'd like to take the same question to you, Warsan.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking this question. Personally, writing is one of my hobbies. To be a writer is one of my dreams. So I want to classify something in here. Being a writer, it's not only during our refugee life, but as a Warsan, I have a life behind it. If I get the chance to get out this miserable life, I would like to be a great writer and famous or a recognizable one. So whenever I take a pen on my paper, I feel free, bottom from my heart, and I release all the link of the pen, my mental problem that I have that moment. The only place can listen to me without no ignition without asking, without rejection my words. It is to write down whatever I'm feeling. To be a writer makes me to get energy or to become a resilient, the life that I'm within. And as a writer, this was like a story. It's really story. I would like to say it here. I was write down something when I was a young girl, grow up in a some country dilemma that never allowed to speak up because of culture, because of traditional, not allowed us to say some words out of our mouths. I start to say to write down my small paper and pencil. Yes, she said to you that, and then I start to make my own diary. I don't have any what's called diary or this modern life. And that makes me to record many story about my own language and other language that I can speak. But early of 2019, when I get this idea about the question, can you be a writer? Can you write your story? I realized that I'm a writer. Then I was say, Karen, I write a lot. Can I publish it? And then he said, yeah, you can be a writer. I said, no, I'm a refugee. I cannot be a writer. Because I believe I am a woman. I'm a refugee. My culture and my tradition never allowed to speak up me. But I understand my words and my writing can speak up and can reach where I want. And the global audience can follow my words and they can understand my situation so that I can be represented the rest of girls living with me. And I can discover the story and stigma from the refugee women and girls living on it. And I can stop the discrimination that we met in culturally and internationally both sides. So when my first English article come out in the world, I really feel like I become a dream again. And I said, yes, my dream of writer become true. So we believe since we are a refugee, we don't have a voice, we don't have a right to speak up, we don't have a right to sit in front of ice screens or saying our words directly. Those is concerned. Maybe we can send it a letter, we can write an article, we can make a research, and we can say stories to take some attention or to understand where we are in. So the first place I feel freedom and I reach my words without permission or without professional paper is Arabic Gologo. So that's what the writing for me. I say to writer is give me another life. I can be survived during this life I am in. Thank you.
I'd love to get your perspective on this, MA Raha. What's the importance of writing to you?
Actually, I can say when I'm writing, I'm free. As my name, I'm Raha. I'm free and I can do whatever I want. I can write about my feeling without being judged. That's the main reason that I want to write. And sometimes when you want to say something to somebody or a group of people, you can easily get judged and they can say, no, you are not right or something. But when you want to write, when you uh, get the pen or when you type it, it's that time that you are free and you can write whatever you want without any, I can say, without any limitation, as Erfan said. That's why I, I like to be a writer and I like to write.
Thank you, MA Raha. And I'm wondering, Jay and Joniad, within this context that you explained before, and then within this practice of writing and creating journalism or creating literature, creative writing, what's the significance of the archipelago in all of this? Sorry, Joniad, you're on mute.
Well, as my friend explained, that they always want to write about their stories, about their life misery, how they are living day-to-day life in a in a country where their existence has not been recognized officially. So this is the story of most of the refugees living in Indonesia. As I said in the earlier talk, like when I was in detention center, there were many refugees requesting me to write their stories. And when I came back to the accommodation, and I also faced the same situations. People, refugees are coming to my room, brother, can you help me write my stories? And can you help me write an email to you this year? Can you publish my stories? And I was not then a journalist, and they knew that because they knew I was good at writing, that because I would help them writing with their emails and others and other short writings for their medical staffs. Then one day I remember a refugee came to my room. He has just recently come from Myanmar by boat, and he has spent a very miserable journey coming by boat from Myanmar to Indonesia, and he has witnessed a lot of his friends died at the oceans. So he wanted to record his story and publish all there how much he has suffered, in the ocean. And when he come to Indonesia, he faced another situation. He is nowhere able to be recognized as a person. So and he requested me, brother, please write my story and publish somewhere. I told them that I don't know if I can publish your story, but I can definitely help you write your story. Then I wrote his story. It's become like a book. Like his story has been covered like around 30 pages, and it took me one week to complete his story. Then I sent it to some of the media, and the media said, "No, it's very long. It's not very journalistic. It's not very literature, and that is need to be corrected, and that is need to be reformatted." And I didn't know how to do that because I was not a journalist back then. I was just a writer. I just know how to write in English. So then I took some courses and learned from some of my journalist friends, including my friend Kiran's. So and then there are still many writing that I have not published like to publish refugee things. So this is where actually the archipelago comes in. So as we have learned that there are actually many refugees that want to publish their writings, and there are many refugees that do not know how to format their story in a journalistic way. So what we are doing as an archipelago member are mediating these writings, and we are also guiding them how to write their stories in a journalistic way, and we are helping them, to publish their writing to the other media. If they want to publish, they can also publish in our media. But our main, goal is to train them to become writers, and we are not like training them deliberately, but we are mediating the writers, and there are already many writers that are wanting to share their stories out there. And archipelago, uh, is where it's where mediating their writings.
Thank you, Joniad. Erfan, can I ask you to jump in on this question as well? For you and from your perspective on Batam, what do you think is the importance of this work with the archipelago?
The archipelago, unlike many local medias and newspaper, uh, the archipelago in Indonesia helps the refugees to publish their own individual voice, their own individual work, their photographs, their art. Someone plays footballs and feels good and feels free. Someone is suffering deep on the inside, and he shouts and just wants to release his pain and empty himself. He feels heavy on the inside. And someone's pick up his or her pen or brush, just pen something or draw something, and that person also feels free and feels good. So when I write, I feel good, but I just wonder how to publish my work. It was difficult for me, like, to become a published writer. I used to write like and raise awareness for the past 5 years. I started back in camp and raising awareness, about what was happening to the refugees behind the locked, massive iron gates and tall walls topped with barbed wires. What were happening to refugees behind those walls and doors and closed doors? Then I thought the best way to tell the people what were happening to them is to write. So I started writing, but it was not getting wider and wider and wider. It was not getting to the real people who are in the position to make a change for refugees, to help them to be heard. So then when we all together launched the Archipelago, I became more hopeful. I feel encouraged. I feel inspired that now we can reach more talented photographers, artists, and writers in Indonesia, and we can make a collective team. So now we could be easily heard by the world, because Archipelago publishes someone's words without censoring one word when they write. So they just put it on the websites and share it publicly and send it out to the world, to the people who read it. So I believe that Archipelago plays a very critical and significant role in giving hope and choice to the people, multiple choice to the people, to illustrate and to show their plights and problems to the world and raise their voice for media. And this is only possible through Archipelago in Indonesia, because I have published like two accounts in Archipelago, and I will continue to write more for this for Archipelago, because I know that through Archipelago, when I write, I will be heard. So one of the best example that Archipelago has recently.
I might need to just cut you off because we're running low on time.
Okay.
But thank you so much for your response, and we're so excited to keep publishing your work.
Thank you.
A very quick final question then, as we're almost out of time, is for Warsan. Warsan, can you share with our audience today how can people support what you're trying to do and what the Archipelago is trying to do?
Thank you very much. I want to make short because of time. As friend is already mentioned, Archipelago position is really needed between refugee in Indonesia. I feel like that refugee Indonesia writers and artists reach their dreams come true. And also another side I can say they can advocate and speak out it. So the support that Archipelago needs today is to support us to become member of us. If you become a member of Archipelago, we can appeal to train more writers and artists to become professional. If you become a member, we can appeal to publish more articles and to give pay them from the writers in refugee to motivate them to keep going their work. You can join us if you are a writer or expert writer. Archipelago is not only for refugee. You can put your writing in here and you can publish it in Archipelago, and that also will be make a connection and building relationship between refugee writers and non-refugee writers, refugee artists and non-refugee artists. And the final thing I said, the more you read our stories as refugee, is the more you will understand our situation. The more we are understanding each other, the more we have a connection of humanity. So please follow the archipelago.org in our website or Instagram or Facebook, and feel free to reach us. We are open and welcoming for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warsan. I'd like to conclude our panel today by thanking you so much, Jay and Joniad, MA Raha, Erfan Dana, Warsan Weedhsan, for joining with us and sharing so much of your work and your insights today. It's been brilliant to talk together. You can follow the Archipelago online. You can see here on the screen, follow and read on our website, thearchipelago.org, and find us on Facebook and Instagram at Archipelago NAG. And we'd really appreciate your support as a member, as a reader of what our writers are doing, and also in submitting your work to us. If you are a writer writing on migration, we'd love to look at your writing or your art and publish your work. So get in touch with us. And to conclude, a huge thank you to the Global Migrant Festival. We're thrilled to be a part of it this year, and we really encourage you to check out the other panels and events. So thank you so much, and hope you have a lovely day.